Simone TV, turn up, travel across the globe, so you know she know her stuff, 30 days to a better you, so you gotta read her book, go check out the show, never know how far she'll go, she can't do anything but grow, everything she has was meant, success makes her content, in her back taking pictures, she has the faith and she has strength, so told like a poet, and you best believe that she wrote it, even when she was at her lowest, you already know she had to stay focused.
Simone TV, and we are back with part 2. We know we said we would come back to you later, but hey, Marchee Davis has got a story to tell, and she's the author of the Cussing Christian. And so now tell me, Marchee, where did that book come from, the Cussing Christian?
It just came from me finally giving myself permission to just tell my story.
To tell your story?
Yeah, and tell my story of how the trauma affected me in so many different ways, and the childhood trauma affected me in a bunch of different ways, in ways that people can relate to, especially like believers, Christian, or followers of Christ, or religious people, whatever you identify with, so that people won't feel ashamed.
So you said that you were writing the book, and you wrote the book, and you came up with the title, and you were kind of ashamed of it?
Yeah.
And why were you ashamed of your title, The Cussing Christian?
Good question. So I was ashamed primarily because I feel like you have two types of followers of Christ, and this is just my opinion.
Okay.
You got the religious ones who are interested often, and then you have the spiritual ones who are interested in their own way. Okay. And so I felt like I was going to get the most backlash from the religious ones. And so in my mind, religious ones are the ones who are, sticklers for following the rules, but then their lifestyles don't match any of the stuff that they're telling you to do. Ooh. And so I just knew for sure they were going to eat that up. But the opposite happened. They were the most intrigued. Okay.
Did you experience some cussing Christians growing up or something that you gave your book this title?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom was the first experience that I can remember with a cussing Christian was from my mom. Okay. So she would say like curse words to us or at us, and then we'll like pull up to church, or we'll be leaving church, and we'd be this, that, and the third. I remember my mom called me something, and I was like, Mom, like, what does it mean to be a heifer? Like, what is that?
My mom told me not to say that word.
Yeah, it's not a good word to say, for real. And so being a young girl, I was just trying to figure out, how are these words, and that was just one example. How are these words my identifier?
Okay. And so the other thing that you were saying is when you shared that and people embraced your topic, the whole purpose of the book was to what?
Was, I guess, for them to do just that. For people to be able to, one, like, embrace the fact that we're all sinners. Oh, okay. So stop lying. Like, what you reveal, like, God can heal. And so oftentimes...
that's good. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. What we reveal, God can heal.
Okay, I like that.
So oftentimes, thank you. God gets the glory, though. He's the truth. Oftentimes, as people who are followers of Christ, we feel like we got to be in the closet with whatever we're going through, and then we got to put on the cloak of fakeness, or not fakeness, righteousness, which can be fake, because we feel like we got to cover it all up, and we have to portray this image of I'm so this, I'm so saved, amen, and then we go back to the crib and we raggedy, and so this
ratchet,
and people see two people,
right?
And so those are the type of people that push people away from the church.
And now you make a good point, because there are things that we don't talk about at the church, and because I know I growing up, I could look at some relationships and I'm like, I thought when you grow up and you became a Christian, you got married, that you had a perfect relationship. Like, I was so naive that I thought that Christians don't have problems in relationships. But what I can say about my mom is she was transparent, and when she hurt, she allowed us to see her hurt. And, when she celebrated, we celebrated. What were some of the childhood traumas that you experienced?
Okay. It's a great thing you said that. Something that I didn't see, was just honesty. Okay. Or like, I'm sad, and here's why. I just saw a lot of just, let me put on this cloak of whatever I got to wear. This cloak of strength. And for me, as a girl trying to find my own strength, that caused a lot of confusion. Like, do I never get an opportunity to cry? So I was never able to cry. Even to this day, like, I had an interesting conversation with my mother. She said, I have 2 kids. One of them is weak, and one of them is not. And so I already knew
Okay.
who she was referring to.
Okay, got you.
And so in that, I'm like, Mom, like, that's an issue right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, all that I've accomplished, I'm still weak in your eyes. But what society tells you
Mm-hmm.
is that people who cry
Mm-hmm.
or are emotionally in tune,
Mm-hmm.
they're weak or they're soft. But
Okay.
what it actually means is if you
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to check in with self and you can identify your emotional whatever is going on,
Absolutely.
you're actually the stronger person.
Okay.
And if you can vocalize what's going on within you and you don't just shut down when it's time to express your emotions, plot twist, you're actually strong.
You know, you make a good point because I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I was telling them that in life we go through transitions, and even though you see me as strong, there are places where I have low self-esteem, and their eyes just like lit up, like not you, not you. And I'm like, no. And because of the transparency, I was able to reach them in the conversation. I said, no, it's true. You know, where we are weak, he is strong.
Exactly.
So there are areas where I look in the mirror and I feel like I'm strong and I feel like I have greatness. And then there are areas where I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm just pathetic. Somebody help me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of Jesus and salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it quotes in the Bible however many times Jesus wept.
Mm-hmm.
So many times. And there were times when he was weak. He was on a cross.
Mm-hmm.
He put himself there.
Mm-hmm.
But he showed us pain, suffering, sadness. I imagine he was crying. I would be crying with nails in my hands.
Absolutely.
He showed us all of that. And so here we are thinking the definition of strength is to not cry, never cry. Don't show them any emotions. Don't show them that I feel something. They're going to think I'm this. If our example, because he's our example, right, showed us crying, being in pain, who are we to think that we're not supposed to be like him? You know, we must normalize feeling and having feelings and showing emotions, because that's actually how we get to healthy.
So, like in your some of your trauma, just give us an example of what was traumatic for you in your childhood.
Okay, good question. One of the most traumatic things that I didn't realize until I became a mom was that one, I was raised in a toxic environment. I didn't know that.
Okay.
So I thought like everybody was getting beat. I thought everybody was getting cussed at. I thought everybody was verbally abused. I thought that was everybody's normal.
Okay.
And so that was pretty consistent. Even talking to my mom about it, you know, we had a great conversation about 2 weeks ago.
All right.
And she was like, well, Shay, like, it wasn't that bad because my upbringing was different. I said, I hear you. This is a good teachable moment.
Right.
It wasn't that bad, but it's still abuse.
Right.
So at what point as black people will we call it what it is? It's not okay. Just because yours was way worse and you improved. The point of the message is to teach us how to stop normalizing abuse.
Okay.
So that was an example, you know, of that. And it affected me in a lot of ways. It wasn't until, like I was saying, when I became a mom, that everything that happened to me as a child just came rushing to the forefront of my mind. And here I am trying to unlearn these tendencies.
Okay.
From being physically abusive to emotionally abusive, like all these things that were done to me. And so they tell us in the Bible, train up a child in the way that they should go. And when they're older, they won't depart from the ways. So here I am, trying to depart from abusive tendencies.
Okay.
But that was my normal.
All right.
So those are just a couple examples, you know, to mention a few, which affected me in a lot of ways.
All right. So did that affect your relationship with your male counterpart? Like, were there things in a relationship you allowed that should not have been allowed?
That's a good question. My relationship with my male counterparts is very interesting. And so with my dads, even to this day, like I didn't have the best relationship with them. My stepdad was very emotionally abusive and at times verbal. And then my biological dad, he lived in Florida. I lived in Houston. That's where I was raised. And so I didn't really have much influence from them. And so that drew me away completely from the male species. Like, even to this day. Like, I'm not naturally drawn to that area because I don't know that interaction. It was never a welcoming environment for me. So I naturally gravitated towards my mom, who, you know, I experienced a lot of abuse from, but naturally I just was drawn to her because that was my caretaker. That was my model of
absolutely.
Everything.
Absolutely, because she raised you. So now you're on the journey of learning how to interact and find out what is good love, because all love isn't good.
Right.
What's a good friendship, what's good relationship, what's good associates, what's good business, what's not good business.
Right.
Because of the setting the boundaries and growing and finding out you have to have them.
Can we talk about boundaries?
Yes, tell me about some boundaries.
Man, I love that you said that word. I feel like it's something that's so important, you know, especially as somebody who's gone through, you know, a certain level of abuse. And we've all gone through just things in general. But setting those firm boundaries is important. And this is something I talk about on Instagram, and I don't even know what going viral means. I'm really not hip to social media like that. But I put on Instagram, like, just because it's your mom doesn't mean you got to take the abuse. So it was something along the lines of that. And, like, this made the Instagram world, like, go nuts. But I say that to say, even in that, I was setting a boundary. And so my mom and I, we didn't talk for 8 months.
All right.
And in that 8 months, I was teaching my mom how to treat me. You know, I love my mama with everything in me.
Right.
And so it was hurtful. We talked about that, too, when she was in town. Like, just about how it hurt me to disconnect myself from her. Like, you birthed me, so I know you were hurt.
Right.
But you my mama.
Right.
So it hurt me, too. But refusing to allow anybody to pass by that boundary that was set. And so we have to be unapologetic about setting boundaries with people who are harmful to us. And we have to just give ourselves that permission to heal.
So would you say sometimes the parents that birth us are not the ones that will lead us to purpose? And we have to love the people that God gives us around us to take us to the different places that we need to travel in our life to fulfill purpose.
Absolutely. And even from the parents that, you know, we were given, we can still identify our purpose from the relationships that we've had with them. Like, I thank my mama, even to this day. Like, without the abuse that I went to, there would be no book. There would be no nonprofit helping people heal through trauma. So that doesn't mean it was right, but even in that, there's a purpose. Like, God promised us that we're going to suffer. 1 Peter 4:12-14. You know, don't be surprised. You're going to suffer just like I suffered. But even his suffering, in a few days he rose, and there was purpose in his suffering.
Oh, that was good. In a few days he rose. So that reminds me, they said pain doesn't last always. Joy cometh in the morning.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's in the morning of crying and going through a healing.
Yeah.
And then it could just be the next morning that's coming up. You know, you lay down and you wake up from sleep. We have surely enjoyed you today, sharing your childhood trauma and your triumphs and your overcoming and your transitioning to where you are now. We appreciate your transparency. We hope you all enjoyed her. Again, this is Marchee Davis. Could you give them information where you can be reached at? She is the author of The Cussing Christian.
Absolutely. So you can reach me by email at Marchee, which is MARCHEE, at Woahcha, WOAHCHA.com. And then you can get on my website, www.woahcha.com. And if you subscribe, you can stay in the loop about when my next book is going to be launching. It'll be out soon.
All right. We thank you all for being here with us today at Simone TV. If you want to reach Marchee, you guys know how to reach us. You can hit us up on Facebook. You hit us up on Messenger. You can hit us up on Simone Wilkerson27@gmail.com. We are so glad you all were here with us today. And that's all the time we have today with Marchee, but we'll bring you back so you can revisit some of her story. Thank you so much.